So social programs are coming under attack. Those programs are supposed to be there to stop inequalities in society and help the upliftment of various minority groups, including Mexican Americans. But you're going to see a number of struggles still going on, especially in the urban areas for Mexican Americans and other minority groups. One of these issues was environmental pollution, right? Or environmental racism, as some call it. This is where minority neighborhoods are exposed to environmental pollution. Their neighborhoods are actually targeted by corporations and businesses and politicians because they're minority neighborhoods, right? And so part of the reason for this is because at the time there wasn't a lot of political representation for minority groups to fight for them at a local level to stop polluters from moving into their neighborhoods, right? So minority groups such as African Americans, Mexican Americans, often their neighborhoods were near areas where toxic waste was being dumped, right? So they're being exposed to that type of pollution. A more specific example in East Los Angeles, a hazardous waste incinerator was going to be put in that neighborhood, and the people who lived in the neighborhood had to fight back to try to stop this hazardous waste incinerator from being put in their neighborhood, so they wouldn't have to be, breathing in all those fumes from that hazardous waste. That's horrible, right? And so you have organizations like the Mothers of Los Angeles fighting back against having this hazardous waste incinerator put in their neighborhood. You'll also see a rise in gang violence in Los Angeles during this time as well. And so why? Why do you see people joining gangs? Well, there's a number of different reasons. For one, poverty, right? People living in poverty, they're looking for a way to make money. Gangs would eventually get into drug sales, and they can make a lot of money that way. And if you're not able to, get into a school because maybe you dropped out of high school and you're not able to get into a good college or anything like that, you can't pursue a higher education, you can't get a good job. How are you going to make a good living, right? You want to live well, you want those material goods. So what do? You join a gang, you get involved in selling drugs, and this is the period of time where you see crack cocaine hitting the streets. I'm talking about in the 80s and then into the 90s. This is where you see crack cocaine becoming really big, and so you could get rich really quick by selling crack. Okay, but this has a horrible effect on the communities, right? So gangs are getting involved in drug sales. Unemployment is another major issue, right? So even if you don't have college education, maybe you could still get another job, right? But if unemployment rates are soaring, right, which we were talking about in the 80s, people have nowhere to turn, right? So they're turning to gangs for protection, to feel like they belong, and to get access to money, wealth, and prestige in their society. With more and more individuals turning to gangs, you're going to start seeing an increase in racial oppression in the legal system, right? Part of this is going to take place with the war on drugs. The war on drugs originally started in the 1970s, but it really took off in the 1980s, where you see an increase in arrests. More and more minorities, including Mexican Americans, are being arrested on drug charges, and so their proportion in the prison population is going to increase during this time. In the 90s, you have the passing of the Three Strikes Law in California. Other states would also pass similar laws as well. And with the Three Strikes Law, if you get convicted of crimes that are considered a strike, you can get life in prison, right? 25 years to life. And so this is going to put a lot of people in jail for a long period of time. And sometimes these strikes, these convictions that are considered strikes, are not violent crimes, right? They may be drug-related crimes, right? So this is an extension of the war on drugs and the effects of this war on minority communities. So if you get convicted of a drug charge, you could get a strike, and that might be your third strike, and then you are put in prison for the rest of your life, possibly, right? And so that's going to really lead to an increase in the prison population, especially with minority groups. And then once individuals are sent to prison, the racial oppression does not stop there, right? In the 1990s, it was found that some prisons in California were organizing gladiator fights, right? This is fights between different racial groups in the prisons, and the guards would watch these fights as entertainment, right? And they would even bet on them sometimes, right? And so, picture, you have gang members from Mexican gangs and gang members from African American gangs being orchestrated to where they're fighting each other, and the guards are just watching and betting on it, right? And then when the fights start going too far, the guards start shooting the individuals to get them to stop fighting, right? And so this leads to injuries, abuse, as well as even some deaths. Okay, so that was going on in the prisons at this time as well. You're also going to see an increase in gang violence as rival gangs start to attack each other on the streets, and sometimes these are gangs from different minority groups, right? And so African American gangs versus Mexican and Mexican American gangs on the streets, particularly in places like LA, the gang capital of the United States. And so with that, you're going to see an increase in harassment from the police and police brutality. You're going to see in the 90s, under the Clinton administration, an increase in stop and searches, where individuals are being racially profiled, stopped and searched, and sometimes this would lead to police brutality. Okay, a case of police brutality was the Rodney King case, 1991. Rodney King was going to be pulled over by the cops. He was drunk at the time, and he decided to take the cops on a high-speed chase. Eventually, the cops cornered him, and when he got out, he resisted arrest, right? And they beat him. He took a number of different blows with nightsticks, and he was kicked, he was tased, and it was all caught on videotape. Okay, and so there it was, police brutality for the whole nation to see. Okay, and so at this point, you would have those officers be put on trial for police brutality for beating Rodney King, but at the end of the trial, the officers were acquitted. Okay, they were acquitted of the crime, of the charges, and so at that point, you've seen riots breaking out in 1992 in Los Angeles. A number of individuals were killed, a lot of people were beaten, injured, there was a lot of looting going on at the time, businesses were destroyed, people were breaking into businesses and just taking goods, a lot of businesses were burned down. Ultimately, it caused about $1 billion in damages. And so basically, people are rioting because of the acquittal of those officers. Because here you have police brutality, which was connected with racism and the LAPD. And pretty much people are reacting to this. And that's why the riots break out. Okay. So a lot of oppression going on for minority groups during this time, and the legal system is playing a significant role in that.